The scene plunges into the dark and chaotic world of the Mistral project, which was one of the most desperate and bizarre aerial concepts ever devised by the German Luftwaffe, as they realized their giant bombers were too slow and vulnerable to survive a solo trip across the ocean. We see a strange sight in the twilight of an airfield, where a smaller Junkers fighter is bolted directly onto the back of a massive unmanned bomber filled with several tons of high explosives, creating a two-story flying machine that looked like a parasitic insect clinging to its host. This was the German version of a kamikaze weapon, but with a mechanical twist. The plan was for a pilot to fly this clumsy combination across the sea and then release the lower explosive-laden aircraft to glide like a massive guided missile into the skyscrapers of Manhattan or the crowded docks of the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
A surprising and chilling detail that many people do not know is that the Nazis actually considered using volunteer pilots who were willing to fly these machines on one-way missions, essentially creating a European suicide squad to ensure that the bombs hit their targets with mathematical precision. We see the pilots training in flight simulators made of wood and scrap metal, their faces pale as they realize that the weight of the explosives makes the aircraft nearly impossible to pull out of a dive. The air is filled with the smell of cheap fuel and the sound of straining metal as these Frankenstein planes struggle to gain altitude, often wobbling dangerously in the wind. There was a specific plan to launch these missile sets from hidden bases in Norway or the Azores, using the cover of a moonless night to slip past the radar of the American coast before the pilot would bail out into the cold ocean to wait for a rescue that would never come.
We see the internal struggle of the engineers who were horrified by the idea of sending their colleagues on suicide missions, yet they were forced to continue by the SS officers who stood over them with clipboards and pistols. This scene captures the absolute moral collapse of the Nazi regime, where human life was treated as just another expendable component in a failing machine of war. The sight of a Mistral composite aircraft hovering over the dark Atlantic like a ghost from a nightmare represents the final evolution of the Amerika bomber, from a sophisticated aircraft into a primitive tool of mass murder and self-destruction. As the camera follows the flight path of these doomed machines, we feel the weight of the desperation that drove men to build such terrifying and suicidal contraptions in a last-ditch effort to bring the fire of the war to the American doorstep. This was the moment when the dream of the super bomber finally lost all its scientific glory and became nothing more than a scream of rage from a dying empire that was determined to take the rest of the world down with it.